So yes, I have been a reporter for a really long time, and I'm sure the high school students will be shocked and appalled to see the kind of stuff I have in my office. You're probably looking at this stuff. This gets delivered to my house every day. You're probably wondering, what? She's crazy. Why does she get this stuff delivered? You have to recycle it. And besides, I can get everything online for free, right? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about just how free the news really is, and ways that and how our information ecosystem has changed. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can follow along on my slideshow. I'm hoping you're seeing my screen. Is that a thumbs up? Is everybody seeing me?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, good. So I want to talk a little bit. I like to call myself a friend of the facts. What I want to talk about a little bit is why that's important today. And as I said, just how free that online news really is. And it's the reason I do this is not because I want people to turn off the internet. I use the internet every day, just like we're doing right now. I spend probably more time on it than I should. But the reason I want to talk about this is that just like every piece of technology, the internet has a good side and a bad side. You know, you can use atomic energy to power a city or blow one up. You can use TNT to put a hole in the side of the mountain and get from point A to point B a lot more quickly and safer, or you can blow up a federal building and kill a lot of people. Similarly with the internet, you can use it for expanding your mind or narrowing it and putting on blinders. And it's really on us, on our generation, particularly on the up and coming generation, to decide which way we're going to use this tool. Are we going to use this great tool for the good or not? And just like every piece of technology, the internet needs an owner's manual. We need to know how to use it well, and we need to know how to troubleshoot when it's broken. So that's why I want you to also become a friend of the facts. Believe it or not, I feel like I'm a little bit of an expert on this because I've watched all these changes happen. And believe it or not, I started my career in the internet before the internet was even existing. This is a picture of me out covering a story. It was a big political debate. So I challenge you here. I want to challenge the high school students, if you want to jump on the chat, what is that old-fangled piece of technology I'm using to get my story in? What's that thing? Does anybody know? Anybody want to venture a guess?
Would you call that like a dial phone?
Yes, it's a dial phone, and it's in fact a pay phone. I used a very interesting piece of technology to file stories back then called a dime. It used to cost a dime to to make a phone call on a pay phone, which is what you had to have back in those days because we didn't have cell phones. So how about another challenge? What year was it? And the older folks can jump in too.
Well, you're only 29, so it can't have been that long ago.
Yeah, exactly. Flattery will get you everywhere. Any guesses?
1982.
Very close. 1980. 1980. So we're talking a long time ago, right? We're talking 40 years ago. And so back then, I want to just give you a sense of what it was like back then. Back then, a story like that, when I was phoning in, would go into a room busy newsroom filled with rewrite men, and yes, it was mostly men back then, and editors, and they would check my story for style, content, and grammar. And then it would go to, I'm not going to show this movie, but it's linked. Almost everything on my slideshow is hot linked, so if we don't get through it, you can share it and check this out. But this is a really cool movie of the last day of linotype at the New York Times. And, you know, I'm not going to play it, but it's very cool. And you can see how news was put together then. And it was really like a factory that it was required to put together a newspaper. So then if, let me see, I need to make my, oh, it's going to play. I'll let you listen to it. That's the sound of the linotype. Okay, so you can, it's very cool. That makes my journalist heart go pit-a-pat. But from there, it would go to big machines like this that would put the papers together and get them ready to be sent out. And I tell you all this because back in those days, it really required a lot to publish. And in addition to the big printing machines, and you had to deliver, and then you had to have a big building to house all those rewrite men and reporters and editors and machines and equipment and trucks. And so it was a big investment. And that big investment really, it was so significant that publishing was really the preserve of rich, mostly white guys back in the day. Those were the people who ran the big news organizations. Of course, that has changed. Digital technology has changed all of that. And what it means is anybody can be a publisher today, and anybody is. Unfortunately, we're not all trained to be reporters. And what that means is there are a couple of important things to remember about the rich white guys who ran those newspapers back in the days when I was just out of college. No matter what you think of them, they had a real financial incentive not to publish falsehoods because they could and still can be sued for libel. And they had a lot to lose. Their buildings, their trucks, their printing presses. So that is not true. And it is important for everybody to understand this. That is not true for the internet. Internet service providers like Twitter, Facebook, Google, TikTok, whatever you know, Snapchat, whatever you're into, those services are exempt from most libel suits. And they are exempt because of this Section 230 exemption that was written into a law in 1996. And there you can see then President Bill Clinton and his Vice President Al Gore, who was a real tech nerd, signing this bill into law. And it included this little exemption for these tiny little garage band companies called Google, Facebook, and Twitter. And that's what they were. You know, they were working out of somebody's garage at that point. It was very much the dawn of the internet. And the lawmakers really had the best of intentions. They wanted to protect, they saw the internet, rightly so, as a very important new form of communications that could improve democracy and more communications and empower people. So they created this exemption. Well, in the meantime, Twitter, Google, Facebook, they've all grown up into these big companies, but they still have no incentive to police their space. And so that's why you're hearing everybody from former President Trump to a lot of newspaper publishers who criticized him all the time, they were all talking about maybe it's time to change this regulation or lack of regulation. And, you know, I don't know how I feel about that, frankly. There's pluses and minuses, but it is, for those of you who are younger, this will be a big debate coming up, a big policy debate. And I think all of us as citizens and netizens have to be interested in this. But right now, you can post anything you want pretty much because, you know, you're the publisher, right? And hey, you don't have buildings or trucks or printing presses to lose, you know? What the heck, it's open season. Except you have one thing that you could lose that is really much more valuable than all of that real estate and all of that equipment. Reputation. Our reputations are all at stake online. So this is Mimi Groves. She's not much older than some of the high school students on this line. She was the varsity cheer captain at her high school. And her dream was to go to the University of Tennessee, which had a nationally ranked cheer squad. And she got in. And then she got booted because she posted a video when she was a freshman in high school and she used the N-word. And somebody remembered that, somebody who was deeply hurt by that. And when the time came, that somebody published it. Now, you can argue, and many people have, that that punishment was too harsh for the crime, but it happened. And Mimi Groves was not the only student to lose a place at college this year for posting something stupid and mean. The point is that when you hit post or repost, you're a publisher. And like those rich white guys, you may face consequences, not losing a building, but something else that's equally important. So again, I'm not saying turn off the internet and throw away your cell phone, but I'm saying that now you're a publisher, you need to learn to think like a reporter. So here are some of the things that reporters think about before we decide to publish. One thing we know not to publish, but they're out there all over on the internet, conspiracy theories. They are comfort food for our heads. We love conspiracy theories because they make us feel good. And here's a great quote about why. This is from a psychologist who studies the impact of misinformation on human cognition. And he says, people find comfort in resorting to a conspiracy theory whenever they have a sense of loss of control or they're confronted with a major adverse event that no one has control over. Sounds like now, right? It would be a whole lot easier, wouldn't it, if we could just blame somebody for COVID? Especially, we could blame somebody who doesn't speak our language, or doesn't go to the same church, or doesn't live in the same country, or isn't the same color. Conspiracy theories are very closely linked to scapegoating. We want to say that evil, if I can just drive that goat out of my community, the evil will be gone. Life's a lot more complicated than that. So that quote that I gave you from Stefan Lewandowski came from a story by a reporter named Marshall Allen. And Marshall Allen is he's a health reporter for one of the top investigative news sites in the country. It's called ProPublica. And Marshall is also an evangelical Christian who wrote this story that is linked here because he was worried about this documentary called Plandemic, which is a conspiracy theory about COVID. And Marshall started looking into this documentary because members of his brother's congregation we're getting fooled by it. So this movie argues that COVID is the product of a vast conspiracy of health officials and, you know, somehow they caused it, and it makes no sense at all. But neither does eating a whole bag of Doritos at one sitting, and we still do it, right? So I think that the long-term consequences of not paying attention to health officials in the middle of a pandemic are a lot more, they're worse than eating a bag of Doritos. So I encourage you, this is linked to Marshall's story, and it's a real point-by-point dissection of a piece of a conspiracy theory. So I really recommend you take a look at that at your leisure. Now, another thing that reporters know to watch out for is disinformation. And there's a lot of it on the internet. Some of it, how many of you have used Photoshop, right? This is what we call photography, F-A-U-X. And here you can see this shark swimming down a highway. And this shark swims down a highway in just about every major city after there's been a big flood. And the way we know that is we've searched for this photo, and you can see, I don't know, I think it's like 25 trillion results or something like that. There's so many zeros, I get mixed up. And so, you know, people are faking stuff all the time, like, oh, it's rained so much. Look, the sharks are swimming down the highway. And I guarantee you the next time it rains a lot in your city, you'll see the shark. It's always there. Not only do people fake, they don't just, or pictures, they fake videos. Now let me see if I can call this up and share it with you. I should have done this earlier, hang on. Okay, are you seeing my screen? Hang on, are you seeing it? Yes, no?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right, let's watch. Hang on.
You guys cool if I play some sports? I love it. More for the audio experience as much as the momentum. Hey, listen up, sports and TikTok fans. If you like what you're seeing, just wait till what's coming next.
So who is that? Who is it?
Tom Cruise.
Supposed to be Tom Cruise, but it's not.
Is it?
No.
It's not Tom Cruise.
Not Tom Cruise?
It's not Tom Cruise. And there's a tell. Let's watch it one more time.
What's up, TikTok?
Careful. Watch for the tell.
You guys cool if I play some sports?
It's not. It's a tell, but it's a fake.
I love it. More for the audio experience.
See that? You heard the ball being struck before you saw it. So whoever did that did a bad job on the audio. But scary, right? It looks exactly like Tom Cruise. And this is part of a new, and you can read an article about it here. About these, just in the last week, there's been this spate of fake Tom Cruise videos on TikTok. And they're pretty harmless, but this is part of a phenomenon called deep fakes, and they get a lot scarier. And some of you have probably seen this one, this is a deep fake of Barack Obama, and it was really done to show how deep fakes, and this is, again, you can link to it, it's a pretty good story by one of the local Fox stations, I think from New York, about how deep fakes work. But you could see that if somebody faked, and you can see how convincing that is. And if somebody faked, like the president of the United States or the president of Russia saying something very provocative, this could be very dangerous. And I'm going to blow through these slides really fast, but the next couple of slides come from a presentation that I saw at Reynolds Journalism Institute here at Mizzou, and we had this contest where we had some top computer science students and journalism students talk about how to spot deep fakes. And there are things like speech synthesis, where one guy, the Wall Street Journal reported, one guy basically wired $250,000 from a company account to some unknown person because he was so convinced it was his boss on the other line. So this stuff it can happen. We've seen how deep fakes are used against public figures. This is a pretty, easy deep fake. You slow someone's video down and they look like they're drunk. But there are more sophisticated versions, like the ones you saw of Tom Cruise, where people's faces are mapped onto the bodies of someone else. And particularly women journalists in countries where women aren't supposed to work get victimized by this all the time. Their faces are mapped onto porn stars, and they seem to be doing something that they didn't do. So to understand this technology, you can jump on to this link. A couple of Washington University professors in Washington State created this game called Which Face is Real? And I'll let you play with that yourself, but it is it's a test, and check it out with your relatives too. I mean, see which generation does better in spotting fake faces. And the point is not that you're going to necessarily spot every fake, but know that these fakes are possible. And know that if you see somebody who seems to be doing something, you need to check it out, because you cannot believe your lying eyes, right? Because these fakes are very sophisticated. Now, fakes can also be, less sophisticated fakes can also be very damaging. And the reason that we worry about this, and it's important to be on guard for disinformation, because this has become a new form of warfare. There is no country capable right now of beating the United States of America. There is no country capable of defeating the United States of America except one. Does anybody want to know which one it is? The disunited States of America. And so our enemies are trying to turn us against each other. Oh, that person voted for somebody different than me. Oh, that person goes to a different church than me. Oh, that person's a different color than me. They must be bad. They must think the worst. And so we see a lot of people throwing gasoline on the fire, which is exactly what happened on November 11, 2015, when there were some big demonstrations on the campus at Mizzou. Right after Ferguson, it was a very intense situation. And this tweet went out with this picture. Cops are marching with the KKK. They beat up my little brother. And some of the demonstrators thought it was real, and they started retweeting it. But it wasn't real. It came from a Russian bot farm. Now, what are Russian bot farms? I'm not going to play this for you, but this is from another great university professor. She teaches at Webster in St. Louis. Her name is Julie Smith. And she and one of my colleagues from Mizzou collaborated on this little video that you can play at home that explains how bot farms work. And but the person who figured this out is a guy named Jared Pryor. And Jared Pryor is a graduate of the University of Missouri, and he is also a colonel in the United States Air Force. And he was doing his master's degree thesis when this happened, and he traced the tweet to Russia. And he wrote a thesis about it, and some of the Russian actors who were involved in this are named in an FBI indictment. We'll probably never get to arrest them, but they cannot come back to the United States without being at risk of being under arrest. Now, here's the good news. You do not have to be an Air Force colonel to spot fakes like this. You just need a simple tool called reverse image search, and it's free. And if you have access to Google, you can get it, or you can use another tool that's linked here called TinEye. Both free, both excellent. And if you did a reverse image search on that very disturbing picture, you would find that it was in fact a real picture, but it was from 2 years before the incident when it was tweeted out. And it was an incident that happened in Pennsylvania, a long way from Mizzou. So a lot of people got scared. And what could have happened here? A protester could have been very angry about this and attacked a policeman. And the policeman could have been hurt. And the protester would have gone to jail. And we become more disunited. So we need to be very, very careful before we hit that repost button, because there were actual people at Mizzou reposting this because they didn't know. They had no idea, but they didn't check. And yes, it takes time to check, but it's worth it. And I'm going to go quickly because I know we don't have very much time, but I want you to understand one thing. The internet plays to our confirmation bias. Our confirmation bias is what says, I want to believe what I already believe. I find the facts to support what I already believe. And why does the internet do that? Because this is a link to a movie that talks about how this happens. Every time you go on the internet, every time you like something on Facebook, every time you repost or you do a search on Google, every time you use a credit card to make a purchase, you're developing a trail of data that marketers use to feed you information. And have you ever noticed when you go onto Facebook or YouTube, the ads are usually for something you've been looking for. It's not an accident. So this is what I mean when I say the news on the internet is not free. We are paying with our data. We are paying with the information that we give to people. And why is that scary? I'm going to jump through a couple of slides here. This is about data collection. It's scary because internet providers not only use that to sell us stuff, they use that to filter the information that they give us on the internet. And the guy who discovered this, and this is a link to an 11-minute talk on TED Talk, that this guy, Eli Pariser, who's a real internet maven, he loves the internet, but he's a liberal, and he started to notice that suddenly all of his conservative friends whom he liked to debate on Facebook, they weren't showing up on his Facebook feed. And he discovered that the Facebook algorithms were filtering them out. That's what we call the filter bubble, because internet providers want you to stay on their sites. That's how they make money. And so they're not going to give you stories that make you uncomfortable. And so this has become a real problem. And so, so it's just something that you need to be aware of. And one of the exercises I've suggested for you is to find a friend who is demographically different than you. If you live in the country, find somebody who lives in the city. If you're young, find somebody who's old. If you love fashion and urban lifestyles, find somebody who shops at Cabela's, and do searches or run your videos or run your YouTube videos and see how different, what kind of ads do you get? What kind of ads does the other person get? What kind of news do you get served up on your feed? Because one of the things that's happening is the internet is herding us into these little pigeonholes. And if we don't hear other people's points of view, we start to believe everyone thinks like we do. And when we meet somebody who thinks differently, we think, well, what's wrong with them? So we need to punch our way out of that filter bubble. And that is something that we need to do. And yes, I will get you access to that. I have to change the setting on the Google slides. Sorry, I forgot to do that, but I'll give you access to the slides. So I know we're running up against the time. Carrie, do you want me to just wrap it up here? Yes.
Whatever you want to do. I think if you want to take a couple more minutes, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Well, so let me tell you. So this is kind of, I know it's a lot, and you're thinking, ugh, how can I possibly do this? If you think like that and you give up, you're letting the bad guys win. That's the idea. Oh, there's no point. What's the use? Everything's fake. It's not. There's an app for that, and it's between your ears. You just need to train your brain to think critically. And that's what we do in newsrooms. So we have this saying in newsrooms: if your mother says she loves you, check it out. Now that sounds harsh, but it doesn't mean that was a sign actually in the Chicago City News Bureau. If your mother says she loves you, check it out. And it doesn't mean that we don't love dear old mom or think that she loves us. But what it is, it's a reminder, a very vivid reminder to reporters to battle against that confirmation bias. It's the things we most want to think are true that we need to check out. And how do we check things out? So I'm just going to give you a few tips. People say, how do I know what is a reliable source? Well, if you're online, one of the first things I do is I say, does this post link to a website? If it doesn't, I'm kind of suspicious, because to me, that's like a footnote in a book. What's your evidence? Okay, you say the earth is flat, but who else is saying that? What's the evidence? So if it links to a website, I feel a little better. Okay, I can now read a story and I can dig a little deeper. If it links to a website though, that's not enough. I want to know, does that website have an about page? Like, who am I reading? And if they have an about page, that's still not enough. I want to look at the about page and I want to know, can I reach somebody? Is there a human being I can call or email and ask a question of, or say, I think you got this wrong? And that leads me to the next thing I do to see, is this website credible? Is this a credible news source? And this may sound backwards to you, but I look for corrections. I'm a news professional, and I look for corrections because I know this: we all make mistakes. We don't mean to, we try not to, but we all make mistakes. And the question is not whether you make a mistake. You tried not to, you don't want to make too many, but what do you do when you make the mistake? Do you, as a news source, care enough about your reputation, the reputation of your organization, and the reputations of the people you cover to correct it? If you don't, you're not a reliable news source. So that's one of the things I look for. Another resource, and some of you have probably heard of this, it's great, we're not alone trying to fact check on the internet. These are hot linked. You've probably heard of these sites: Snopes, Fact Check, PolitiFact. They're all terrific. They're really good. If you see something on the internet that you wonder, is it true? One of these sites is going to be one of my first stops. Has somebody else checked it out first? And then there are new organizations that really are working hard to try to help people do their own checking on the internet. One of them is called the News Literacy Project, and it's really terrific, helping people check things out. And they have a free newsletter called The Sift, which tracks crazy things on the internet, like Tom Cruise fake videos. And then there's another organization called the Center for News Literacy, and it's based out of Stony Brook, which is one of the campuses of the State University of New York, and they're great, and they have a lot of free resources for students and for teachers on how to teach. We don't want to tell you what to read or what to think. We want to teach you how to think for yourself. And that's what these organizations do. And then lastly, for the high school students, I highly recommend, and these are all linked, this wonderful program called Newsfeed Defenders. It is a game, it's a video game, and it's fun. And it is brought to you by iCivics, which is the group that was co-founded by Sandra Day O'Connor. She was the first woman to ever sit on the Supreme Court of the United States. And she was also a former state legislator. So she cared a lot about this. And I'm really proud to say that this particular game was developed with funding from the Reynolds Journalism Institute right here at the University of Missouri, where I teach. So it's part of the J School. So those are just some tools. There are more. But I think that'll help get you started being your own fact checker and your own friend of the facts. I have these nice friend of the facts buttons. I don't know if you can see that. But really my message to you is the digital revolution has really changed our relationship with information. And the good news is you live in a world with no gatekeepers. You know, there aren't a bunch of old rich white guys deciding what you can read and watch and listen to. That also means with freedom comes responsibility. And it means that you have to be responsible about checking some of this stuff out and monitoring your own information diet. You know, are you eating information junk food all the time? Or are you getting some whole grains into that diet? And it also means that the jobs that we professional reporters used to do, and editors, which is fact checking, finding out if the sources are legit, all of that, that's now to you. So that's why I really like talking to people about some of the tools that we use to check things, because we can use the media for good or we can use the media for evil. And I want you to be empowered to use it for good. And my message to you is a saying that was made famous by a former president of the United States named Ronald Reagan. And when Ronald Reagan was negotiating with our longtime adversary, the former Soviet Union, the then Soviet Union, Ronald Reagan's famous saying was, trust but verify. And that's what you have to do, is trust. Don't be cynical. Don't just assume that everything is fake or wrong or not true. Trust, but understand how to verify something. And you can do this. You can absolutely do that for fun. I've spent my whole career verifying things. And so it's satisfying, it's fun. And once you start to get into the habit, I think you might find it addictive. So since you're all publishers, learn to be reporters. And if you need help or advice, here's my contact information.